So Kate Smurthwaite was a character that I created to show some of the things that feminists might think. You know, I didn't think anybody would take her seriously. I was pushing the boundaries and a lot of people were laughing at it.
Abortions are awesome, everybody should get one. As a matter of fact, I think Gokwan should do adverts for abortion. Because let's be honest, they're more slimming than vertical stripes or yogurt.
Hey buddy, don't forget to breathe. Anyway, actually... Oh, no, I'm sorry, do forget to breathe. That's what I meant to say.
I am an adult baby.
Oh, being mean to blokes, it's easy, isn't it? Good. Oh, fuck, I must make a career of this sometime.
For the uninitiated, Kate Smurthwaite describes herself as a feminist comedian and political activist. Some have suggested that the term feminist comedian is something of an oxymoron, but having enjoyed many of Caitlin Moran's contributions to the Sunday Times, I wouldn't go that far. Nevertheless, in my humble subjective opinion, Kate Smurthwaite is not a very funny feminist, at least not intentionally, and given her relative lack of success after over a decade on the comedy circuit, I think it's not unfair to say that most people who are familiar with her unique comedic approach will probably agree with that assessment. For those who have yet to have the pleasure, allow me to present, quite literally, the funniest joke I've ever heard her tell.
My favourite joke that I tell is, at the moment, is does anyone else think it's weird when atheists call their kid Christian? I think a much better choice would be Godfrey. Cue canned laughter.
Sorry, we're all out of canned laughter.
The late great playwright and polemist George Bernard Shaw once cuttingly observed that those who can do, while those who can't teach. And the fact that Kate seems to spend as much of her time teaching stand-up comedy for beginners as she does stand-up for herself undoubtedly says something about something. Indeed, while she's been waiting for that big comedy contract, she's also managed to make quite a name for herself as a presumably expert opinion for hire on TV and radio, on a seemingly ever-widening spectrum of subjects that to date have included such things as global warming, religion, fashion, consumer trends, employment rights, and allegedly gingerbread houses, all of which are funneled through her own peculiar prism of values, political beliefs, and self-awareness. Anyone who's heard her unintentionally hilarious analysis of something she calls the glass waterfall may very well wonder about her expert credentials. But Kate is undoubtedly an expert at expressing her own opinion, and has now become relatively infamous for some relatively, shall we say, passionate contributions to television discussions and debates.
I'm intrigued. Intrigued indeed. Because I recognise you from somewhere, but I don't know where or what it is.
Well, the answer is that you might well do. I'm not super famous, but I'm a comedian and I'm like a political activist-y kind of comedian. Okay. So I have been on quite a few TV shows. Like usually you'll see me arguing with politicians. They sort of line me up to shout at them.
Problem. This is institutionalised sexism, and you're just sitting here doing it flagrantly and without even...
Peter Lloyd.
No, that's just obnoxious.
Peter Lloyd,
sorry, you have to give me a chance to respond to that. That is ridiculous. No, hang on, I won't do your show again if you don't let me respond to that.
Go on, Kate, have a word.
Come on, may I please finish my sentence? I will walk out of the studio if I'm not allowed to.
If you were to walk out of the studio, I would come with you, because I don't believe you should be giving airtime to someone who's a serial
Wait a minute, I want silence. I want silence.
They know that men... mostly men watch sports. Let me finish.
Don't touch me, please.
Right, and now I'm now guilty of some sexual assault in the workplace. It's unbelievable. Let me finish.
And I think that when we see a few high-profile individuals, perhaps including some in this studio, locked up, it'll be time for other people to back off.
Okay,
and I very much look forward to that time. He thinks he's going to take that privilege and just wander on air and say obnoxious things about a campaign for equality. Then that is horrific bigotry, and I object to it being aired.
But it's not about equality, because they didn't bother to analyse what men think.
And now this might sound incredibly corrupt, but this has genuinely happened, and I'll tell you, and you might think, oh, I'm awful, but this is true. There have been occasions on which they've told me what the debate was about, and I have quite genuinely said, I'll take either side.
You're just looking for something to say, dear.
You're talking tripe. You don't go in and say, no man's going to say, hello, sir, hello, darling.
All right,
Where do you get
it is a
she goes shopping.
Kim, it is a discussion, so she's entitled
she's not telling the
her
truth.
Well,
Then please tell the truth.
If she's experienced that, then that's...
Have you ever experienced this?
It's not our debate.
Presumably this is one of the reasons she keeps getting invited back, because although Kate Smurthwaite is not a very funny comedian, her punditry can often make for extremely funny viewing, especially when she's wheeled out specifically to promote her special brand of radical feminist polemic.
And what's actually shocking is that it's been a guy for the last 12 iterations. The chances of that, you know, if you know how to toss a coin and count how it lands, are pretty low. So it's pretty exciting that we're finally there. It's kind of a relief. We're also looking at a character who fights injustice, you know, never puts their own needs first, always looks after others, only resorts to violence as a very last resort. It sounds like every feminist I know. I think it's about time that we had the Doctor played by exactly that.
I became familiar with Kate's unique style while researching my virtual abuse documentary series, which considers concerns that some reasonably high-profile ambassadors for 21st century feminism may be exploiting the very modern phenomenon of online abuse for their own political purposes and even personal profit. Kate has been paid to espouse her expert opinion on this issue on numerous occasions, an expert opinion which she claims has been informed by her own personal experience, which quite literally involves daily rape and death threats from all around the world. And while I've no doubt that she does genuinely witness abusive language online, having considered numerous statements that she's made on the subject, in my own humble subjective opinion, she also promotes a perception of online abuse, which includes an extremely generous conflation of comments that could more realistically be described as criticism.
When I was on Question Time, people who agreed with me started a hashtag, which was very nice, that was Kate Smurthwaite 4 PM. People who disagreed with me also started a hashtag that I don't understand. The people who didn't agree with me started the hashtag Lefty Cockwomble.
Let's turn to the feminist and comedian Kate Smurthwaite, who says she gets internet abuse on an industrial scale, receiving things like rape and death threats on practically a daily basis. Kate, very good afternoon to you.
Thank you.
How true is that? I mean, what?
Typical stuff that I get. The only reaction I'd like to see is her coming to terms with an oxygen-free environment. Holy hell, she is awful. She should stick to her real job. Being a C-word on live television, she's as funny as famine.
So what should we do? Kate Smurthwaite has some suggestions.
I think what we should do is set up a specialist, well-trained police unit to deal with this. And there's two things they need specialist training in. One is the thing that every 14-year-old knows how to do, which is how to look at a YouTube account and find out who it is. And that involves contacting the companies sometimes, and it involves knowing this stuff. And the other thing that the police need is some really careful training about when to act and when not to act. Oh, no, I'm sorry, do forget to breathe. That's what I meant to say.
But in this modern world, I mean, you are known for being, you can be quite outspoken, you know, you've got your staunch views and you stick to them, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But
woman has opinions. Stop press. Yeah, I know.
Oh, being mean to blokes, it's easy, isn't it?
I wonder, though, you know, of course, if they're threatening violence or if it goes further than that, then it's a big issue. But, you know, I get a lot of trolls as well. They don't particularly bother me. I just imagine them being in their mum's basement with their balcony bellies, drinking White Stripe, waiting for their mum to shout them for their tea. And, you know, and probably even more infuriating for them, I just mute them rather than block them, so they've no idea that they're just talking to the ether. Isn't that a better way of approaching it?
Well, it's interesting that we do end up talking a lot, don't we, about what's the best way to deal with being on the receiving end of internet abuse. And, you know, of course, you've got a great strategy, and I'm glad it's working for you. And I use all of those strategies too sometimes. But on the other hand, I don't think that we should be asking the question, how should victims respond to being victims of crime? The fact is, the people who need to behave differently are the people who send this abuse. And there's a lot of people out there who hate women. If you're watching this on YouTube and you don't think that's true, here's a little game. Scroll the fuck down. Yeah?
I am the one, the way your son don't need a gun to get respect up on the street. Under the son, the bastard son will pop the clock to feed themselves.
Kate's public carry-ons have generated a fair number of comments from her fellow YouTubers in what she rather dramatically describes as hate videos. I wouldn't be surprised if she gives this video a similar classification. So for the record, I'd like to be clear that I do not hate Kate Smurthwaite. I wouldn't go as far as to say that I love Kate Smurthwaite, but I do genuinely think that she's hilarious. And given her ability to effortlessly outdo any mere mortal's attempt at conscious stereotypical parody, I even sometimes find myself wondering if she's not some sort of deep cover troll operating on a meta level of absolute comedy genius.
You know, I didn't think anybody would take her seriously. I was pushing the boundaries and a lot of people were laughing at it.
And in the next video, I'm going to consider what is arguably Kate's finest comedy performance to date. It involves Kate sharing some expert opinions about goings-on in the kitchen, and it is a performance that she has been somewhat coy about mentioning ever since it was first broadcast. And in my own humble subjective opinion, it offers something of an intimate and revealing insight into how her undisputed passion for tolerance and gender equality informs the intersectional way that she talks her personal political talk, and most particularly the way she walks her walk.
Can't you see it too? There's an elephant in the room.